They looked at me with complete indifference and said, "Mom, we can't make it to Dad's memorial. We're swamped. Just light a candle for us." My own children, the 3 people I brought into this world, couldn't spare a single afternoon to honor their father on the 3rd anniversary of his death. So I did something they never expected. I sat down with my estate attorney the very next morning and completely rewrote my will. And when they showed up 6 months later at the Oregon beach house, expecting to spend their summer vacation there like they owned the place, they walked in to find my attorney sitting at the dining table with documents spread out, my longtime caregiver Maria beside me, and their inheritance reduced to almost nothing. The expressions on their faces, that mixture of shock and rage, I'll carry that memory with me forever. My name is Margaret, and I'm 67 years old. I've lived in Portland, Oregon for 40 years, worked as a registered nurse for 33 years before retiring, and raised 3 children, mostly on my own, while my husband Richard worked long hours building his medical practice. Richard passed away 3 years ago from a sudden heart attack at 69. We just started to enjoy retirement together. Before I go further, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your state or city in the comments. Knowing I'm not alone in this means everything. Let me take you back to April, 3 years after Richard's death. The anniversary always hit me hard. Richard and I had been married for 42 years. We'd built a life together, scraped and saved to buy that beach house in Cannon Beach when the kids were young, worked side by side as he built his practice, and I supported our family. Those first years after he died were devastating. I'd wake up reaching for him. I'd set the table for 2 out of habit. I called my oldest son, David, 2 weeks before the anniversary. He's 44, lives in Seattle, works in tech, always busy with something. "David, honey, I wanted to talk about the anniversary. I was thinking maybe we could all go to the beach house together, scatter some flowers in the ocean like Dad loved, the whole family." "Mom, that weekend is terrible for me. I've got a product launch. Sarah and the kids have soccer tournaments. Can we do it another time? It's the anniversary. It's important to me. I really need you there. Look, I'll send flowers to your place or something. I just can't swing it right now. We'll do something later, okay? Gotta run. I'm late for a meeting." The line went dead. I sat there in my kitchen, the coffee getting cold in my cup, feeling that familiar, hollow ache. I told myself he was just stressed. Work deadlines. I'd try my daughter, Rebecca. She's 41, lives in California, works in marketing. We'd always been close, or so I thought. Rebecca's response was even worse. "Mom, you do this every year. You get all emotional and expect everyone to drop everything. Dad's been gone for 3 years. At some point, you need to move forward instead of dwelling on it." "I'm not dwelling. I'm remembering him. He was your father, and I remember him in my own way. I don't need some forced family gathering to prove I loved him. Besides, Marcus and I are taking the kids to Disneyland that weekend. It's been planned for months. You planned Disneyland on your father's death anniversary? We didn't plan it on purpose. It just worked out that way. Look, I can't cancel a $1,000 trip because you're having a hard time. You're a grown woman. Handle your grief yourself. Handle your grief yourself." Those words cut deep, but I didn't show it. "Fine. Have fun at Disneyland." My youngest, Thomas, he's 38, lives in Denver, works as a financial advisor. I texted him since he never answers calls. Same response. "Can't make it. Ski trip with clients. Important for business." "Sorry, Mom." 3 children, 3 excuses. Not one of them could spare a weekend to support me on one of the hardest days of the year. I thought about all the times I'd been there for them. When David's startup failed and he had to move back home for 8 months, who took him in without question? When Rebecca had her second child and was drowning in postpartum depression, who flew to California and stayed for 6 weeks? When Thomas's wife left him and he was barely functional, who paid for his therapy and called him every single day for 3 months? Me. Always me. But apparently, I'd become an inconvenience. My grief was too much. My needs were unreasonable. The anniversary came. I spent it alone. I drove to the beach house by myself, a 2-hour drive down the coast. I walked the beach where Richard and I had walked hundreds of times. I scattered flowers into the Pacific. I cried in the house we'd built memories in, surrounded by photos of our family, wondering when everything had changed. Not one of my children called that day. Not a text, not a message, nothing. That night, sitting alone in that beach house, something shifted in me. I opened my laptop and sent an email to my attorney, James Morrison. I'd worked with him when Richard died, setting up what I thought was a fair estate plan. Everything split equally 3 ways. The beach house to be sold and divided. The medical practice building Richard had owned, which I still collected rent on, split 3 ways. My retirement accounts divided equally. James, I need to schedule an appointment as soon as possible. I want to completely revise my estate plan. Major changes. We met the following Monday. I walked into his office with a clarity that surprised even me. This wasn't anger. This was self-preservation. Margaret, what's prompting this? James asked gently. My children have shown me exactly how much I matter to them, and I've decided to act accordingly. I laid out my plan. The beach house, the place my children had spent every summer growing up, swimming in the ocean, building sandcastles, the place that held our family's best memories, that goes to Maria. Maria was the home health aide who'd helped me care for Richard in his final months. After he died, she'd continued to check on me. She'd bring me meals when I forgot to eat. She'd sit with me on hard days. She called every week just to chat. She'd helped me maintain both houses, never asking for anything beyond her normal pay. She was more family to me than my own children had been. The medical practice building, I'm selling it. The proceeds go into a charitable trust, half to the hospital where Richard worked for 30 years, establishing a scholarship fund for nursing students, half to the Alzheimer's Association, since that's what took Richard's mother. And my children? Each receives $5,000. Enough that they can't claim I forgot them, not enough to matter. James nodded slowly, taking notes. Margaret, I need to ask, are you absolutely certain? Estate decisions made during grief can sometimes be regretted. I've never been more certain. They told me to handle my grief myself, so I'm handling everything myself. Over the next month, James drafted everything meticulously. We documented everything. I underwent a cognitive assessment to prove I was of sound mind. We recorded a video of me explaining my decisions, calm and clear, making it obvious no one had influenced me. We built a case that would make contesting nearly impossible. The hardest part was keeping it secret. Every time David called with some superficial conversation about his latest project, I wanted to scream. Every time Rebecca posted on social media about her perfect family vacations, I wanted to comment about how she couldn't spare one weekend for her mother. Thomas sent his monthly checking-in text, the bare minimum, and I had to resist telling him exactly what I thought. None of them visited, not once in those months. I spent my 67th birthday alone. Mother's Day came and went with cards in the mail, but no calls. Father's Day, the first one without Richard, I spent crying in the beach house, alone. Maria was there, though. Sweet Maria, who brought me cake on my birthday, who called on Mother's Day to take me to brunch, who sat with me on Father's Day and let me talk about Richard for hours. This is your house now, I told her one day in July, sitting on the deck overlooking the ocean. When I'm gone, this is yours. You've been more of a daughter to me than my own daughter. Miss Margaret, I don't know what to say. She had tears in her eyes. Your children. My children have made their choices. This is mine. Summer turned to fall. That's when the demands started intensifying. David sent an email in September about optimizing my assets. He'd run some numbers and thought I should sell both properties, move into a retirement community, and invest the money more aggressively. He offered to manage it all for me, naturally. Rebecca called in October, suddenly very interested in my estate planning. Had I updated my will? Did I have everything organized? She'd found an elder law attorney who could help make sure everything was properly structured for tax purposes. Thomas, the financial advisor, sent me a whole presentation about wealth preservation strategies for seniors. He wanted to set up a meeting to discuss my portfolio. Not one of them asked how I was doing. Not one mentioned their father. Every conversation circled back to money, property, and what would happen to it all. Then came November. I'd planned to spend Thanksgiving at the beach house, just me and Maria. I'd told the kids I was doing a quiet holiday this year. They'd all seemed relieved, actually. David had his in-laws to deal with. Rebecca had a Friendsgiving. Thomas was going to his girlfriend's family. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, I got a group text. "Hey, Mom, we're all coming to the beach house for the weekend after all. Figured it's time for a family gathering. We'll be there Friday morning." No asking if it was okay, no checking if I had other plans, just announcing they were coming. After a full year of being too busy for me, suddenly they all had time, and they were coming to the one place I'd found peace. I called James immediately. "They're planning to ambush me at the beach house this weekend." "Perfect," James said. "I'll be there. Let's end this." I called Maria next. "This weekend is going to be difficult, but I need you there with me." "Of course, Miss Margaret. Whatever you need." Friday morning, I drove to Cannon Beach early. The November ocean was gray and churning, matching my mood. James arrived an hour later, briefcase in hand. Maria came with lunch for us. We set up in the dining room, the same dining room where we'd had countless family meals, birthday celebrations, Christmas mornings. Around 11, I heard cars pulling up. All three of them, just as expected. David's Tesla, Rebecca's Range Rover, Thomas's BMW. They'd brought their families. I could see grandchildren in the cars. They'd assumed this would be a nice family weekend at the beach. They had luggage. They were planning to stay. I watched through the window as they got out, laughing, pointing at the ocean. Rebecca was already taking photos for Instagram. David was on his phone. Thomas was directing his girlfriend where to park. They walked up to the deck. David tried his key, an old one from years ago. It didn't work. I'd changed the locks back in April, right after that anniversary they'd all missed. He knocked, confused. "Mom, you there? The door's not opening." I opened it. The look on David's face when he saw James sitting there in his suit, documents spread across the table, Maria beside me with her hand on my shoulder. "What's going on?" David asked slowly. "Come in," I said. "We need to talk." They filed in, confusion turning to suspicion. Rebecca's husband stayed outside with the kids. Thomas's girlfriend suddenly got very interested in her phone. "Why is your attorney here?" Rebecca asked. "And why is your housekeeper sitting at the table?" "Maria isn't my housekeeper. She's my friend, and she's about to become the owner of this house." The silence was absolute. James cleared his throat. "I'm here at Margaret's request to inform you of changes to her estate plan. Margaret has revised her will, removing all three of you as primary beneficiaries." "You what?" David's voice cracked. "I revised my will. This beach house goes to Maria. The medical practice building is being sold, with proceeds going to charity. You each receive $5,000. That's all." "Mom, this is insane." Rebecca's face had gone pale. "You can't just give our house away." "It's not your house," I said quietly. "It was never your house. This was mine and your father's house. We bought it. We paid for it. We maintained it. The fact that you vacationed here as children doesn't make it yours." "We're your children!" Thomas shouted. "Everything you have should go to us." "Why?" I asked. "Give me one good reason why you deserve any of it." "Because we're family," David said. "That's how it works." "Family," I repeated. "Let me tell you about family. Family shows up when your father dies. Family doesn't skip the anniversary because they have a product launch or Disneyland or a ski trip. Family calls on your birthday. Family visits on Mother's Day. Family doesn't disappear for months and then suddenly show up demanding keys to a house they don't own." "We've been busy," Rebecca protested. "We have lives, careers, children of our own." "And I had a life too," I shot back. "A life that included being a mother 24/7 for years. A life that included putting my career on hold when you needed me. A life that included being there every single time any of you called, no matter what I had going on. But when I needed you, when I was drowning in grief, when I asked for one weekend, just one, to remember your father together, what did you tell me? The room was silent. You told me to handle my grief myself. So that's exactly what I did. I handled everything myself. James pulled out documents. Mrs. Rodriguez underwent a full cognitive evaluation. She's completely sound mind. We have video documentation of her explaining these decisions. We have records of your attempts to control her finances. This will is ironclad. This won't stand up in court, David said, his voice shaking with rage. We'll fight this. With what grounds? James asked calmly. Your mother is healthy, competent, and has every legal right to distribute her estate as she chooses. You're welcome to try, but it'll cost you far more in legal fees than you'd ever recover. And it'll destroy what little relationship you have left. What relationship? Rebecca laughed bitterly. She just destroyed any relationship we had. No, I said firmly. You destroyed it when you treated me like an ATM instead of a person. When you couldn't be bothered to remember your own father. When every conversation for the past year has been about money and property and what you'll get when I die. You destroyed it. I'm just acknowledging reality. What about our kids? Rebecca's voice broke. Your grandchildren? You're punishing them for our mistakes? I'm not punishing anyone, I said, and for the first time, my voice wavered. Do you think this was easy? Do you think I wanted it to come to this? I've thought about the grandchildren. I've thought about everything. But I can't reward your behavior just because you have children. That wouldn't be fair to them either. They'd learn that you can treat people terribly and still get rewarded. You're being vindictive, Thomas spat. You're a bitter old woman who's mad we have our own lives. Maybe I am, I acknowledged. Or maybe I'm just someone who finally learned that being someone's mother doesn't mean accepting whatever scraps of attention they deign to give me. You taught me that my needs don't matter, that my grief is inconvenient, that my love is something to be exploited. You taught me that lesson very well. James stood, collecting his documents. This meeting is concluded. The will is filed and legal. I strongly advise against any legal challenges. They'll be expensive and unsuccessful. David turned to Maria. You did this, didn't you? You manipulated her. Maria said nothing, just held my hand. She did nothing, I said coldly, except be here, except care, except treat me like a human being instead of a trust fund with a pulse. Everything else was my decision. Get out, David said to Maria. This is our family's house. No, I said, standing up. This is my house, and you need to leave, now. We drove all the way from Seattle, David shouted. That's not my problem. You showed up uninvited, assuming you had rights to a property you don't own. Leave now, or I'll call the police. You can't throw us out, Rebecca said. We're your children. Watch me, I replied, pulling out my phone. Mom, please, Thomas tried. Let's just talk about this rationally. There's nothing to talk about. My decision is made. You have 5 minutes to get off my property. They didn't move at first, standing there in shock. David looked at Rebecca, clearly expecting her to do something. Rebecca looked at Thomas, maybe hoping his financial expertise could fix this. But there was nothing to fix. It was done. You'll regret this, David finally said, moving toward the door. When you're old and alone and need help, don't come crying to us. I've been alone, I said quietly. For 3 years, I've been alone. Even when you were physically here, you weren't really here. So nothing changes except now I'm honest about it. They left, slamming doors, tires spitting gravel as they drove away. Through the window, I watched them go, my 3 children, driving out of my life over money they'd never legally owned. I sank into a chair, shaking. Maria brought me water. James gave me a moment before speaking. You did the right thing, Margaret. I know it doesn't feel good right now, but you protected yourself. I just cut my children out of my will, I whispered. What kind of mother does that? The kind who's been hurt too many times, James said gently. The kind who finally put herself first. That doesn't make you a bad mother. That makes you human. After James left, Maria and I sat on the deck, watching the gray ocean. She didn't try to make me feel better with empty words. She just sat with me, present, like she'd been present for 3 years. Miss Margaret, Maria finally said, I meant what I said before. I don't want to be in the middle of family trouble. You're not in the middle. You're on my side. There's a difference. We spent that Thanksgiving weekend together, just the two of us. We cooked a small turkey. We walked the beach. We watched old movies. It wasn't the big family gathering I'd once dreamed of for my old age, but it was peaceful, real, free of resentment and obligation. Over the next weeks, they tried different approaches. David sent a long email about how hurt he was, how I'd blindsided them, how they deserved better communication. He didn't apologize. He didn't acknowledge anything they'd done, just blamed me for how I'd handled things. Rebecca tried the emotional manipulation route. She sent photos of the grandchildren, wrote about how confused they were about why Grandma was being mean to Mommy. She suggested family therapy, as if I was the one with the problem. Thomas tried the logical approach, sending articles about elder financial abuse, about caregivers who manipulate lonely seniors. He positioned Maria as the villain and himself as my protector. I saved every email, every text, every attempt to guilt or manipulate me. I forwarded them all to James. They were building their case, but they were also building mine, showing exactly the kind of people they'd become. Christmas came. I spent it at my Portland house with Maria and her daughter Sophia. We exchanged modest gifts, made tamales, watched Sophia open presents with pure joy. Rebecca posted elaborate photos of her family's Christmas on social media, designer gifts piled high, everyone in matching pajamas. David posted about his ski trip to Aspen. Thomas posted about his New Year's plans in Cabo. Not one of them reached out to me. In January, I received formal legal notice. David, Rebecca, and Thomas were jointly petitioning to have me declared mentally incompetent. They'd found doctors willing to testify that sudden estate changes could indicate dementia. They had statements from people saying I'd seemed emotional and unstable since Richard's death. They were trying to take away my autonomy, my right to make my own decisions, all to get their hands on money that was never theirs. James responded with our documentation. The cognitive evaluation showing I scored higher than average for my age. The video testimony. The records of their financial manipulation attempts. The emails and texts showing their neglect. Within 3 weeks, their petition was dismissed. The judge actually noted in his ruling that the children's behavior seemed more concerning than the mother's. They didn't give up. Rebecca tried showing up at my Portland house unannounced, bringing the grandchildren, using them as shields. I didn't let her in. I watched through the window as she told those children that Grandma was sick and didn't recognize them anymore, poisoning them against me. David tried accessing my medical records, claiming he was worried about my health. My doctor refused and reported the attempt. Thomas tried a different tack, suddenly apologetic. He called in February, saying he'd been doing a lot of thinking, that he realized they'd been selfish, that he wanted to rebuild our relationship. I almost believed him until he mentioned, casually, that if I was open to discussing the estate plan again, he'd be willing to help manage things. It was never about me. It was never about relationship. It was always about money. By March, a year after that anniversary they'd all missed, things had quieted. They'd tried everything and failed. The will stood. Their attempts to prove me incompetent had backfire, actually strengthening my case. Their harassment was documented and had made them look worse, not me. I sold the medical practice building in April. The hospital was thrilled about the scholarship fund. They named it the Richard Morrison Memorial Nursing Scholarship. Every year, it would help someone achieve their dream, the way Richard had helped so many during his career. The beach house stood waiting for Maria. I updated the deed to transfer on my death, but I also gave her a key and told her to use it whenever she wanted. She and Sophia spent weekends there. They maintained it, loved it, treated it the way it deserved to be treated. My days became simpler. I volunteered at the hospital. I took art classes. I traveled a little, nothing extravagant, just places I'd always wanted to see. Maria often came with me. We became real friends, not just caregiver and client, but two women who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Sometimes I miss my children. Not the adults they became, but the children they used to be. I miss David at 8, bringing me dandelions from the yard. I miss Rebecca at 10, reading stories to her brothers. I miss Thomas at 5, falling asleep in my lap. But those children grew up and forgot the mother who raised them. I don't regret my decision. On hard days, I pull out the folder James gave me. I read the emails where they discussed selling my house before I was dead. I look at the calendar, showing they all skipped their father's anniversary 3 years running. I remember the feeling of sitting alone in the beach house, waiting for just one of them to call. And I remember I didn't choose this. They did. My story isn't about revenge. It's about survival. It's about finally understanding that love should never be one-sided, that being someone's mother doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, that your final act of autonomy is deciding who deserves to benefit from your life's work. The beach house sits waiting for someone who values it. The scholarship fund helps nurses who'll care for others the way Richard did. And I spend my days with people who chose to be in my life, not people who felt obligated to tolerate me until I died. Sometimes the hardest part of motherhood is accepting that you did your best, raised them with love, gave them everything, and it still wasn't enough to make them good people. That's not your failure. That's theirs. Thanks for listening. This is my truth. I handled it myself, just like they told me to.